Hey everybody, it's Master Gallengeist here, bringing you my review of Captain America Iron Man Issue 1. And I overall enjoyed this issue. My main complaint comes with Veronica Eden. Throughout this, they did do a good job of having a villain that you're like, sweet good God, she needs to get put away as fast as possible because she's an annoying, whiny asshole. Oh my God. They might have done too good of a job on that because I'm like, good God, this is... She makes for a good villain because you're like, okay, she's building herself up. She's like, yes, some villains want to save the world, but you see most of her actions and how she's just like, I'm gonna kill the superheroes kind of shit. And it's just, okay, you're saying things, but your actions are pretty much a lot further from that. But this issue starts out and we see that many years ago, Tony had pretty much a one-night stand with Veronica. And that she was pretty much trying to get this kind of thing with this human AI interface that her team had pretty much come up with. And Tony's like, oh yeah, that's kind of obsolete. My team pretty much was doing that 6 months ago. And she's like, what the fuck? And she's, because she brought it up and she's like, what, this was just for nothing then? It's like, oh, I said great things were going to happen in the bedroom. It's like, yeah, that's Playboy Tony, and they really nail that. You don't feel that Tony's completely coming off out of nowhere with this. This is how he was characterized, mainly in that kind of phase. Now, granted, he hasn't done that a lot lately, so if you're like, why the fuck is he acting like this? They pretty much nail that kind of spot on for Tony, and she's just like, God damn it, what do I do now? I'm a people person. I can get in front of people and do this stuff, but I'm not that much into the science aspect. He's like, well, if people are your thing, I could pretty much get you an interview at S.H.I.E.L.D. or whatnot. She's like, you do that? And then we shift and we see that she is in court with, I shit you not, she has a person that's presiding over named Judge. It says that that's his name. And it even has a little plaque thing. Wait a minute, right there. And she's pretty, it's like a hearing, she's there to pretty much enter her plea deal. And she just pretty much jokes about it and so she pleads guilty. And we then shift over and the vehicle is pretty much taking her to prison or whatnot. And then they're like, what the fuck's going on? Is that Iron Man or whatnot? And we find out that it is 51, one of the candidates that was in the 50 States Initiative. And it's like, ooh, interesting to be pulling from that kind of thing. You don't really see that pulled very often from the fallout of the Civil War and Tony's whole 50 States Initiative. You're like, what the hell is going on here? Well, they're kind of confused. He's attacking to get her out or whatnot. Tony gets into the area and is blasting out, shooting some things behind him to pretty much tell the civilians, hey, be calm, Iron Man's kind of containing this stuff. Now, it was kind of a little confusing because we see the police, we see 51 doing his shit. Tony's, of course, oh, okay, there we go, because it took a little bit for, the rest of the kind of group to kind of, get Veronica out to pop up. But we see that 51 is an alien kind of dude with armor tech kind of similar to Tony's, and he's on the run that he's killed 3 people. It's like, what the fuck's going on? Of course, this is pissing him off, but he knocks him towards this kind of truck where you got these people blasting out. It's like, alright, they're coming in to pretty much help get Veronica out. Of course, Tony kind of needs backup, and we hear that hey Tony, you need some help, and Steve pops up and pretty much throws a motorcycle. Well, not throws, his motorcycle falls off, and let's see here. No. Sorry, there's a fold-out thing that's not having any... But see, he, pops down and kind of, hits those guys. It's like, yeah, Steve will use tactical advantage. It's just that could have been a little bit more kind of nutty. We also see that Veronica is talking about how heroes are brash and loud and everything, and they fuck up a lot of things, and Tony's dealing with one issue, and Steve, of course, goes after her, kind of riding his shield. And she, of course, gets out a gun, and she's like, hey, some of us villains want to make the world a better place, as she then proceeds to shoot out a bus's tires. Like, some of us care. It's really kind of weird. It does show her hypocrisy, but it's kind of strange to be like, okay, you're trying to get the villain's point of view, but she immediately shoots out a bus's tires, and Steve, of course, throws himself into it to kind of, like, get everybody under control and be like, don't worry, you'll be perfectly safe, as Tony, of course, comes in to catch the bus, as he says. It's like, okay, that works out. And it's funny, we get some little kind of things, women saying that, like, hey, if I were younger, we'd go out with you kind of Cap kind of stuff. And I don't have any problem with the art, really. It's just Cap's face looks really weird here and a little bit strange here. Granted, the Tony faces work pretty well for me, but it's kind of a little bit strange, just in those kind of instances. Otherwise, you got the armor and, like, the action scenes that look pretty well, and the action moves pretty straightforwardly. It doesn't look really kind of muddled or anything. And one of the big kind of things that I have for any kind of Iron Man comic is the armor awesome looking, and does it look like as well detailed as it can be. That doesn't mean you can't have a style that's kind of like less detailed and have it not work, but Iron Man is usually in his armor, and if his armor doesn't really look that cool to look at, it's a visual medium. It's like, alright, I'm always kind of like disappointed at that. Now granted, there's stuff that can happen that's like tight deadlines, just weird, crazy shit that can happen, but it's like, that's a big thing. And they're able to keep it within line with what we've seen in the other Iron Man comics. Though granted, I need more of a kind of time frame reference, because the latest Iron Man comic was dealing with the whole power cosmic, so I don't know if this is before that shit starts going or after that shit starts going. It's always a little bit weird when you got this kind of stuff. So Steve and Tony have their little powwow. Steve is pretty much like, hey, she tried to take over as Hydra Supreme, and Sam and Bucky wanted me to keep tabs on her, that's why I'm here. Tony is like, hey, I pretty much had a one-night stand with her and vouched for her to go into S.H.I.E.L.D., and it's funny, he's trying to pass off his whole phase thing for Steve, and Steve's like, not having any of that. He's like, you're still in that phase. That's a phase that I kind of like. But they start figuring out kind of what Veronica's endgame goal is, or where she would be going next, and that she was linked up with this Senator Todd Baker. Let me see. Baker, yep. And it's like, okay, their pretty much goal was that Veronica would take over Hydra, Baker was trying to reinstitute S.H.I.E.L.D., and they would essentially be able to have their own kind of war and be able to control it from two kind of fronts. It's like, okay, yeah, that makes tactical kind of sense. Now, granted, that's what Steve and Tony have at this point, even though Veronica's pretty much trying to say that she's trying to save the world. So, her doing it that way in what Steve and Tony had connected with does not jive with what we are hearing from her in her own headspace. I don't know if her plan does involve that kind of thing. We'll have to see how this kind of series kind of pans out with that. But that's where we've got at the moment. Now, granted, they're able to pretty much figure out the assets that are kind of linked to Baker that Veronica would have access to. And then we shift over to her talking with 51, and she's like, I don't understand you. He's able to text out, and she's like, oh, yeah, I can get that for you. And then they just kind of repeat that after shit kind of gets real, and we see that, like, superheroes blast into it, and the Paladins pop up, who are comprised of members from the 50 States Initiative who didn't want government oversight. Now, granted, they do surprise them, but they still get kind of like, they're still a little bit on the back foot before Steve and Tony pop in, and Veronica's just like, fucking take them all out, kill everyone. It's like, that's kind of weird. You were going to try and talk everything down. Why wouldn't you try and do this here? Like, I kind of get they kind of fucked with your, like, escape plans, but you still did escape. And if you're trying to save everyone, as you're alluding to, would you not try and get maybe Steve and Tony on your side for that, even if you don't like superheroes? But we get our action scene. We see that the Paladins are It's really kind of weird. I understand that they were trained during the 50 States Initiative, but you really wouldn't see that in how they're dealing with everything here. I mean, they get certain guys knocked out and everything. Tony deals with a certain dude who shoots one of the people. Steve is able to help another one of the paladins and knock someone out with a rock. But Veronica and 51 are able to escape, being like, yeah, I'm able to get that for you. Steve's kind of like, hey, didn't you guys have training for this? It's really kind of strange, because he's like, yeah, why, like, the initiative trained you guys, right? Yeah, we were caught by surprise. They had no idea you were coming. That's what surprised us. It's like, what? Kind of weird. Hopefully they kind of get more into that. But we see that they get the rest of the kind of Hydra people under control. The Paladins are alright. And the thing is that she's out to save the world one dead superhero at a time. And that's kind of where the issue ends. Now, I do like seeing Steve and Tony team up because their dynamic is always a pretty interesting one. Whereas they have friction on how they usually work and do things. And this is able to do that out, while also being able to show why they're also a good team, because they do think in different kind of realms, and they have different access to different information. Steve being like, okay, she's Hydra Supreme, Sam and Bucky are pretty much doing this, and then bringing up the whole connections with, like, Senator Baker and seeing them kind of back and forth between it. And I think that this creative team at least has a pretty good handle on Steve and Tony so far. It's just mainly from their interaction after Veronica's first escape. Now, my biggest kind of problem at this point is Veronica herself. Now, she is an interesting villain because it's like, okay, you're trying to save the world, but she's really kind of grating, and if we keep up with this, or, God forbid, escalate it too much, she's going to become really super annoying. And that's just from what I've gotten from the first issue. So we'll kind of have to see how that kind of pans out, because I did not read Falcon and the Winter Soldier to see how they kind of handled her there. So this is my first introduction to her as a character and story realms in the comics. So she could have been handled better there with that creative team. I'm not quite sure. But I am intrigued to see how this goes forward. I think they have a solid base for this story. I think they have a good kind of handling at this point for Steve and Tony. So I'm willing to look into and give this a little bit more of a try and see kind of how it pans out. So if you're into Steve, I think this would be pretty good to check into. If you're into Tony, I'd say the same. And if you're into both, I'd be like, yeah, definitely check this out to kind of see where it's at. It's not an expensive... Well, it's the normal kind of $3.99. I thought this would be more kind of like an event comic or whatnot, which could sometimes trend into like the higher kind of digits. So, yeah, it was pretty good reading because it had nice artwork for the most part, interesting story, and I got to see stuff of Tony and Steve doing what they do best. So those are my opinions on the issue. Tell me what you guys think in the comments below. If you liked it, if you didn't like it, if you agree with me, if you disagree with me. Also, like and subscribe, and I hope you have a good day.